had to go back through Japan because I was well trained. I was fully recovered, and I would probably have been back there. And if you stay on the front line long enough, you're going to lose your life. And so the inevitable happens if you stay on that front line long enough. And
I have that up there.
pardon?
I do have that up now.
Okay, this is a cartoon. It's kind of my favorite. I've been I've read a lot of these stories about people that think that we should not have had the Enola Gay. And here's, as you can see, think of all the people who died because of this plane. That's the Enola Gay who dropped that bomb in on Hiroshima. This old GI veterans. Think of all the people who lived because of this plane. Now it can depend on that. There's no question. We would have lost at least another million or maybe 2 million people in war if we'd had to fight the Japanese in a ground war. Now, I'm not too much in favor of atomic wars, and I don't know what the cure is, but I certainly was pleased with the results that Truman did when he ordered that to be done. When I was at MIT, a lot of it was fenced off because they said they were working on a nuclear fusion. And this atomic bomb was pretty much developed at MIT, and a lot of it was being done when I was there, so kind of an interesting occasion. Got something else, Joe?
You just hit the first one I wanted to talk about was the MIT. A lot of these questions are really good. What was it like when you first got home? How did you tell your family you got home?
Well, for me, that's a good question. My family were stoic Norwegians, and my mother was terrified that I'd return an inhuman, atrocious individual who would not be the kind of civil person that she would like to think of as her son. And so they were truly worried. When I left home, my family was living on a farm in McLean County, and my dad and mother were neither one in physical condition to continue, so they sold the farm and eventually moved to Valley City. So when I got back to home, I came to Valley City, and nobody knew me. So I go to the American Legion Club, I go to the VFW, and everybody there was greeting their friends that were coming home. And they were cheering each other, and I was kind of out of place, pretty much. I went to a pub, and in some of those public pubs they had, and I found no difference there. So my welcome home was not the same as every other person's welcome home, because most of them came home to a cheering family and a cheering bunch of friends that they'd left before. I had no friends in Valley City. And so so mine was probably a little different, but I must tell you about my parents. My mother told my siblings and others that do not ask Lynn about the war. she did not want them to talk about the war at all. And my parents, now you hear a lot of people say that he didn't talk about the war. Well, number one, a lot of them didn't have a lot to say because they had some pretty comfortable jobs in the finance office or in radio or in something like that. But other ones, they didn't get the chance to communicate. I could not talk to my parents. My parents never asked me about the war, never would let me talk about the war. And interestingly enough, I sent home letters, you know, and my parents kept every scrap of paper there was. They kept my dad had his journal of all of the things he bought on the farm when he was homesteading, including the snus and the sugar and all the other things he bought. But they threw away every single one of my letters. I did not have a letter. I cannot go back and reflect on what I might have said or what I might have remembered, but I do have a pretty good memory, so I can rely on that. But my family did not give me that kind of a welcome. I did go back to my old home area, but we didn't have the farm, and so I stayed with my sister for a while, and then I did some other things, and finally I get a letter from a friend of mine that had been in basic training with me, he went to Yukon in the ASTP program, and he was back at UND. He'd been badly wounded. He had scarred unbelievable, and he had a bullet enter right here on his body, and it came out right here. He had a big hole right there, plus all the other. And so he was back in school, and he forwarded me a letter into combat. Eventually I got it back home, and he says I'm at Grand Forks. So I hightailed to Grand Forks, and I immediately started spending time with the people I knew, the people that were returning. And so then, that was in the first semester of 1945. In the second semester, I re-enrolled at UND, and all of my friends were starting to come home. They came home one by one, and in my situation, we were all privates. All of my friends, they never got promoted because they'd gone to this special training program, and they were not welcome to some of the locations that they entered. And so they'd come home, and we'd have a talk. And we'd all go to Whitey's, and each one that was home, and we'd get a table, and we'd sit there all night long and talk. We'd talk. And we'd relieve ourselves of our stresses and our strains by trying to reassure each other. And that was our therapy. And that was the way we did it.
What, talk about when you came into New York Harbor on the boat, and then what was your first contact? How did you contact your family when you got back?
Yeah, this is one of your questions is, what is the question?
Well, there's a lot of questions about, what was it like to come back from?
Yeah, but the question about communication.
And communication, how did you communicate
Well,
often with your family?
the only communication I had with my family was by letter. And none of my letters are preserved, by the way, the ones that I wrote. So, they won't, and I had no way to preserve their letters, not in the type of situation I was in. So, I get back to Grand Forks, or to, New York City on a hospital ship. And, we did go, we did leave, Wales, I'm trying to say the name of the town in Wales, but we left it in a caravan of about 20, 30 ships. And it was after May 8th, after the war was over in Europe. And we got out into the middle of the ocean and they said, we do not need, we could turn on the lights, we could, the Japanese really had no strength in the Pacific, in the Atlantic at all, if they had any in the Pacific. And so we were, so our caravan was pretty much over, and we were just kind of riding home. And we arrived home and went to Patterson, New Jersey, to a hospital there. And of course, we went right past the Statue of Liberty. Probably one of the most emotional days. You know, you asked about emotional days, some of the things there, and that was very, very much an emotional thing to see that statue. And I came in about the 28th of May in 1945. The war was over on May 8th in Europe, and I left Bristol, Wales, England, and came back. And so I got in about the 28th of May, and the next day they announced you can call your family. One call. I had not spoken to my family since I left home on a vacation just before we took off for Europe. They gave us a 2-week break, and I had never spoken to anybody. So my family had moved. We had no phone on the farm, never did have. We didn't have water or sewer either, but then we had no phone, no communication that way. We didn't have your cell phone, by the way. We didn't have some of those things. And so my family was in Valley City, and they were not able to get a phone because phones were not being allocated to unnecessary people like that. They bought a little house there, and they didn't have one, so I had the operator call the high school. And I had a sister who was in high school, which meant she would have been in grade school out on the farm when I left home. And I had them call for my sister Helen. And finally, after some struggle, they got Helen to the phone on it was about May 29th. So I was able to then tell Helen that I was back in the United States safe, and I was in a hospital in Patterson, New Jersey, and I didn't have anything, I didn't know where I was going or anything else, but I could tell her that I was at home. And so the school superintendent let her immediately go back to her family and tell them that Lynn is back in the United States. Now, I don't know if you communicate that way or not these days, but that's the way my communication
That
is.
internet on the farm, wouldn't you? What's our time for this?
12:15 is when they need to go for lunch, so they have time to
12:15.
eat.
One of the questions I thought you'd have an interesting answer to is, did you ever take any souvenirs with you from enemy soldiers when you were fighting?
Answer is yes. I took a bunch of souvenirs off of soldiers that we either captured or were dead. We saw a lot of dead Germans. I saw a number of their good pistols. One of them was the P-38, a nice pistol. And I picked up watches and I picked up other things. And we sit in my foxhole and admire them. And the next day we start moving and we threw them all away. We did not dare to carry them and be captured or something with a German, with a German pistol or a German watch or something, because they'd known we'd probably taken it off a dead man. And the revenge might have been there. So, yes, I did accumulate a lot of nice pistols, and I threw away a lot of nice pistols. And I picked up a few knives, and I picked up a few watches, and I threw them away as well.
One interesting question is, the question is, was it different from the stories? And you and I talked about it.
Okay,
Are
repeat
the-
that.
Was World War II different from the stories?
Okay. The movie stories were mostly pretty good. However, they had to sensationalize them, and they had to have a lot of loud noises, and had everybody together. We never yelled, we never screamed, we never, not much anyhow. We did not gather in numbers together, but you had to take some of those pictures. If you have ever looked at some of those good movies, and that one of the 101st Easy Company,
The Band of Brothers.
Band of Brothers, is very good, and it's quite realistic as they could make it. And some of those movies, you had to have a love story, or you had to have a story of some kind in it, but they were good stories. And I'm not talking about some of the flying wars. I'm not talking the bombers. I'm not talking about the fighters. I'm not talking about the Pacific War, because that wasn't my war. But I do have one concern now. I don't know what Putin is up to, and I don't have any recommendations, or I don't have any opinions on it, but it doesn't look good to me, and I do worry about North Korea. I don't think that I worry about China as much as I do about them, but I want you people to know that you protect your freedoms. You love your freedoms. You love the opportunity to have your family with you, and you're a part of it, and not see them torn apart like they do in other countries.
We have a question up here.
Can I ask, would you recommend for some of us to join the military? Do you think it's a good thing, even after all you've been through?
Would you recommend that they join the military? Do you think it's a good thing to be in the military?
Yes. It's a very good career. I want you to try to strive for officer. You'd want to move on. I don't know if you have ROTC in the junior level or not.
Yes.
I was never a professional soldier, but we need intelligent professional soldiers, and we need quality people in there. And we have an Air Force base in Minot, and those people expand our universe in Minot. They also learn from us, and it's a good thing. Yes, it's as good a career as many of the others.
Any other questions you guys have?
I talk too long?
I don't know, were you drafted or did you volunteer?
Okay, everybody was going in, you know. I am talking about, December, 7th, I suppose. Technically, I was a volunteer. I had a serial number of a volunteer. My serial number starts with 1708, and that is not what the draftees had. But they were trying to stack people in different areas so they didn't all have to take their training together or that. There was absolute loyalty, knowing we had to go in to the service. And so I enlisted in this reserve, which gave me an opportunity to stay in college longer, which probably would have given me an opportunity to be an officer or something, but I wasn't. And it doesn't, I have no regrets as to that. I served the war as I should have, and I feel it was a gratifying service. I have had a very good life. You gotta learn to bounce with what comes along. You gotta come back and find the gratitude and love in your family that you can. They're very important. And you gotta find the gratitude in the life that you left for others by being in that war. And I think we did. I think that I have no compunction about the fact that we, without the United States in that war, it would have been it would have been lost. Now, 1941, December 7th, I was at UND when that happened. However, I can remember when England was brought into the war by the Nazis, and on December 7th, we all knew that we would all be served if they could, and I didn't find any conscientious objectors, except a few of them that contended that they had a religious conscientious objection, and we respected them for that. But other than that, we all felt an obligation. I graduated from Velma in the class of 1940. The 1938 class of Velma had one death out of the 30 in the class. The 1939 had one death, and several POWs. The 1940, my class, had one death. The 1941 and 42 also had one death out of the class. So you see the numbers were there, and our participation was there as well. Did I cover what I was supposed to?
How did, you have some medals up there, and you have the Bronze Star.
Why don't you pass around that?
I can carry it around.
I'm proud of that jacket, by the way. Not everybody can come home with their battle scar jacket.
How did you, what was the Bronze Star for?
Well, the Bronze Star is supposed to be for some service of quality in combat. I have the Purple Heart. I have the Bronze Star. I have, this is the European Theater of Operation with 3 battle stars. One represents the Bastogne, one the Ardennes Forest, and the other one the crossing of the Rhine. And this is my combat infantry badge, which is really considered something of value. And this is the a glider badge, and that was very much compared to the paratroopers. And the invasion of across the Rhine was the last time they used them because the casualty rate was too great. There wasn't too much safety in that one. And some of these are medals that you know, somebody just decided to award me. We had an organization or an association of the 17th Airborne, and I was vice president of that at one time. And I believe I was vice president when they had their last meeting. And we just had to dissolve it because nobody would live in it anymore. And then this is something, I guess that's university stuff that my wife put on there, and I'm not gonna take off.
Your dog tags are there too, right?
What's that?
The dog tags are yours.
Yeah, my dog tags are here. And
the Bronze Star was for when you got caught that day behind lines
sure.
and came back.
This one is a Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, and the Good Conduct Medal. I don't know what these two are. One of them is the American Theater, and I don't remember what the other is.
He's playing down that Bronze Star, but that is actually quite an honor to get that. And we've talked to some other military people that have said those, they didn't.
Where my other,
Maybe.
my other thing we should pass around.
It's over here.
Is that about as much as you want me to do?
You guys have other questions?
What's the, you talked about, looking at the souvenirs
You
again.
got Dave, or Joe Relay. I don't
Speak
know
up.
very well.
Oh, you were talking about some of the time you spent, looking at stuff as a foxholes. Was there a lot of, time spent not, when you weren't directly in combat, was there a lot of time that you spent doing something?
When you weren't in direct combat, did you have a lot of time besides being in foxholes, being in direct combat? Is that right?
During the time from about the 1st of January 1925 until we got pulled off the line, we really had no rest. We came back. I slept in a barn attached to a house in Belgium one night. I slept in a kind of rundown, beaten up shack in a valley on the floor. Another 2-3 nights we were back for rest. Slept on the floor there, but those are the only times that I was off the line in that particular battle until that battle was over. And what do I say about it? We had no breaks at all there. The hospital I went to for repairing my combat wounds, I crossed the Rhine in a duck boat, and on about the 27th of March or so, about 2 a.m., I went into a surgical room in very much like that, those MASH, it was just like that kind of a hospital with tents and all. And I went under the knife at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and they took out, and I had a second surgery later, and I don't, that wasn't too important, but I don't recall too much about that one. But anyhow, I get back to my room, get back and get into a bed in a tent. And in the morning I wake up, there's a person in the bed on my left. He had a full body cast, and he was praising the Lord for his wife. And we all did that a lot of times, by the way. But he was praising the Lord and, praising him for his wife. And I turned to him and started speaking to him. And he said that he'd been in a parachute, and the parachute didn't open. It just kind of came down as a sword, and we call it streamer. And as he was coming down, he grabbed a
cargo parachute.
a chute of a
Some cargo or something.
of a cargo chute, and he rode that down. It was a little light, and some of that fell on him and broke his back. But he was pretty happy. He was alive. His chute didn't open, but he got down. Now, all the troopers that came out of parachutes, one of the things they did was look around to see if there was somebody that, who had a chute that didn't open. And if they saw one, they'd grab it if they could get to it. But in his case, he grabbed a chute on his own and came down. So, you see some interesting things. And the Red Cross, for all of the criticism some people might want to give it, they were the ones that took care of the soldiers in the hospital. And they were the ones that notified my family that I was in the hospital. They didn't give enough detail, so they didn't know if I was half dead or not, but they did at least notify me. And they were the ones that gave me my toiletry and things like that. Now, from the time I went into combat until I came back out at the end of March, I never had a shower, I never shaved, I never brushed my teeth. I had a little bit of diarrhea, and we added a lot of clothing because we didn't. Whenever we got issued a new long wool underwear about every 2 weeks, and we just put it on underneath and added the others on the outside because it was cold.
One funny incident when didn't you and a buddy go into a farmhouse one time, and was interesting.
Okay, he wants me to tell about across when we got into Europe. I slept on that tarmac, and the next day they said, well, the Germans aren't too far away. We better set out some guards here to protect these places. And so we went on guard duty, and I suppose I don't remember which day it was, but we were standing guard at night, and in a rather quiet area of France. And the next morning, the neighborhood woke up, and Tidball was standing guard with me. He's the one that I told you that died earlier. Tidball and I were standing guard, and the resident came out of one of the houses and said, "Come on in for coffee or warmth," both. And so they gave us a weak coffee or a weak tea of some kind, and Tidball went in first, and I stood guard. And Tidball gave him a pack of cigarettes, which we always, gave him cigarettes and candy and whatever. So he gave him a pack of cigarettes, and then he came out, and I went in, and they had a boy in a crib that looked like he was bigger than to be in a crib, but I suppose that's all they had. And he stood about that much above the crib. And when I came in, he was smoking one of those cigarettes. And I guess I will add at this point, my opinion, and I've had a lot of experience with medicine, otherwise, don't smoke. Now, do other things in reasonable amounts, maybe. And I don't know about drugs. But smoking is the worst thing you can do in your life, and it's so unnecessary. Don't smoke. But this guy was smoking, and he was standing there with a cigarette. And of course, I gave him another pack of cigarettes. So. But don't smoke.
You had another funny story about when you guys packed to go on your airborne operation, and what did your hillbilly friend pack?
You gotta come back, and I can't hear you. My hearing is.
When you went on your airborne, before you're airborne, you packed some essentials for survival. What did your hillbilly friend pack? What was his essential?
Oh, well, when we were notified, we were going to make that Ryan crossing, we all packed these concentrated chocolate. I didn't smoke, so I smoked on occasion, but I didn't smoke during the war. We all brought the essentials, chocolate and more chocolate and other things, because they were survival, they were concentrates. My friend from Missouri, he got a pack from home of tobacco twists, and all his baggy pockets were full of tobacco twists. Why worry about anything to eat? You got the twists.
And he's the one who survived, right?
Yeah, I talked to him one time, more than 10 years ago. He didn't know, he didn't have too much of a memory. But, the interesting thing, I used to like to, I played a lot of poker, because what else is there to do sometimes, especially on the ship and that. And I wouldn't do bad. I got a pretty good calculating mind. And, but I'm terrible in shooting crap, or, throwing the dice into the corner of the vitrine and coming up with them. But it was so interesting that these hillbillies, they could talk to those darn dice, and they could make those darn dice do what they wanted to. And, but we did it, so one day in Belgium, we must have had a break of some kind, and I might have not told you the total truth on no breaks. But, but we had a break and we got a partial pay. We hadn't been paid for a long time. And so we had got paid in francs, in French francs. And that meant we had, and the smallest one they had was a $20 bag, 20 American dollars. And so we got into a crap game, and I had about $400, I guess. And but it was interesting. We had American money in there, we had British pounds in there, and we had Belgian francs in there, and French francs. And we'd throw that money into the pot, and somebody would throw the various kinds, and then they'd have side pots as well. And these hillbillies could decide the odds faster than anybody else could. Heck, they were back to the next game before I had it figured out what it was. And this one from Missouri, he could not read or write, but he had that pot figured out, and with all of these different values in there, it didn't make any difference. That pot was figured out all the time. Don't underestimate these rednecks. Don't underestimate them at all, and I love them, by the way.
Well, thank you. We are out of time.
Oh, are we?
They might need to eat lunch, that 30-minute lunch they get, but
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming in.